Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. I hope the day is treating you kindly. If you're new here, my name is Latte and I'm super excited to have you here because we're going to be decorating the museum area. So I've already gone ahead and built up some cliffs just so I had a rough idea of how everything was going to flow. Of course, we will be working on the general shape of it a little bit later, but I wanted to get most of the work out of the way so that way we can jump right into decorating. So the first thing that we're doing is putting down the inclines and moving the museum to the top of this cliff. For this first incline that was going to lead up to the museum, I wanted it to be inset into the cliff, so I'm just fixing up the shape now. When I was making this, I sort of regretted keeping it so short, so I actually ended up extending the cliff outwards a bit after I was done filming. And then I am putting the museum, I've sort of already marked out the spaces, and I also went ahead and changed out the log staircase that I had here to the stone so that way it all matches. After paying off all my inclines, we're going to start landscaping. So I should explain the idea that I'm going with for this build. So I wanted my museum to be tucked away into a forest, and this area of my island is the upper left portion, and I'm turning it into an enchanted forest. So my goal is to try to make it as magical and whimsical as I can. And I also wanted there to be a little trail that led up to the museum, so it was a little bit out of the way, but it's not completely hidden. While I'm putting down my trees and trying to make a forest, I'll explain my thought process behind the reasoning of where I put the museum. So it may look like I'm trying to hide the museum, but it's actually a very intentional build. So the space in front of this is the castle ruins, and it's still not finished because it is a pretty big build combined of different smaller areas that's going to make it all up. And I wanted there to be a building that looked really grand, and the museum fits that description perfectly because once you fully upgraded it, this is what it looks like, and it's a very grand building and it can be a little bit difficult to figure out where to put it. And because of how grand it looks, I decided to keep it as one of the only buildings that was still intact after everything sort of broke away. It's also the only building that is on this layer of cliffs, so I wanted it to look a little bit overgrown and like it's been reclaimed by the enchanted forest. This build was a little bit chaotic to record, and at some point I must have forgotten to press record when I was doing the pathways for the dirt patches, but you didn't really miss out on too much. It was just mostly putting down random patches of dirt and trying to make it flow with the shape of the cliff that I had made. I also wanted to make sure that I had some stone up here next to the museum, so that way it looks like it had some solid structure underneath it and it's not just randomly placed here. Also, because I wanted the forest up here to look really dense, I added in some tree standees, and I decided to go with the cherry blossom variation because I'm not actually setting my dream address to be during cherry blossom season, and I know that's pretty untypical for a very cool island, but the main bushes that I've used throughout my island is not in season during cherry blossom season, so my love for them has outwon the desire to put it during cherry blossom season. Also, it will help it make it feel a little bit more enchanted. So after I put down some of these stone patches, we are now working on the inside of the cliff. So I wanted to make sure that it was still walkable, but I didn't want there to be too much of space on the top cliff. Hopefully that makes some sense. So we are just adjusting the shape. I ended up making it a little bit more smaller and a lot more rounded. I also made sure that the shape worked well for the other side. My main priority for this was making sure that the flow worked well and it was an easy walk to go up the one side of the cliff and come back around the other side. We are also going to be putting a cliff on the end of this trail, so you will see that in a little bit. I also decided to decorate this little walkway into what is going to be turned into a graveyard. Even though it's not directly part of the build, you can see it in the background, so I wanted to make sure that I finished it off too, so that way it looks nice for the final reveal. I just added in the stone pathway on the ground, and then I readjusted the moon so that way it was floating in the middle. This is one of my favorite items in the game, so I was happy I was able to use it in this build because it makes it seem so magical, like a floating moon. Come on, that's so magical. Because I wanted the moon to be completely centered on that piece of land, I had to undo some of the waterscaping, but after I fixed that up, we are now starting to properly decorate the trail. So on my inclines, I've put this circle stone design on either end, so I'm just adding that. And here we are figuring out the second staircase. I originally wanted it to be the same as the staircase on the other side, but clearly there wasn't enough space for that because of the trees, and I didn't really want to get rid of any of those trees because they make it feel more like a forest, so we just made it work. And finally, we have begun to decorate properly. So I really wanted to use these Capricorn statues, and I feel like looking back on it now, they do look a little bit out of place at the moment, but I'm hoping that if I can add a couple more into the surrounding area, it will kind of fit in better. So hopefully we can make that work in the future. I am adding in a whole bunch of mush lamps. I really wanted this area to be illuminated at nighttime, and I wanted it to be really magical looking, so we are going to achieve that with the mush lamps. And basically the entire process from now on is me just walking around and trying to figure out where to put stuff that I've picked out for this build. My main goal for the trail was to make it look as whimsical and magical as I could, and I kind of wanted it to look like it had just come out of a fairy tale. So I used a whole bunch of different colors to make it as colorful as I could. For some reason though, I've have dedicated the blue mush lamps to be just near water sources, so I did use one that was just towards the right side of the build, and that's basically it, to be honest. Like, I don't really have much I can explain. I just put stuff down and played around with it until I was happy with the way that it looked. I also really wanted to add in a well in this area, so I had reserved some space in between all these trees for that, so I'm just figuring out how I wanted it to be spaced. I mentioned before that I wanted the forest around the museum to be really dense, so I used the tree standees to help with that, but I also added in the cypress plants, and I hid some of the pots with the hedge fencing that we have in the game, and I feel like it helped make it really dense looking. I know that we have the tree cliff glitch, but I was just too lazy to do it. So I know that if I had probably used that, I could have added in a whole bunch more trees and made it feel a lot more dense than it actually is, but I couldn't be bothered, so I wish we could add more trees closer together, but alas, we're stuck with what we have in the game, so I tried my best to make it work. Like I mentioned before, I was basically just putting stuff down and trying to make it work. It was a lot of experimenting to figure out what I wanted where, and I did move around quite a lot of stuff, but I feel like it ended up working itself out in the end. I'm also really looking forward to seeing how this area looks once the castle ruins is all complete. I feel like it's really coming together really well. There's still quite a bit of work to do. I still have to make the enchanted forest, which is to the right of this, and the actual inside part of the castle ruins. So a little bit more left to go, but you know, we're getting there. I plan to add some villager houses below the museum as well, and I also want to add in some waterscaping and also make like a centerpiece design near Nook's Cranny, so that way it kind of feels really grand when you walk into the area. But yeah, that's sort of the general idea I have. We'll see how it ends up working out. An item I see used a lot in fairy cult builds and islands are the Papa Bear, and the one that I have at the moment is the floral design one, but I would like to be able to change it out to a different variation in the future, definitely before I upload the dream address. But right now I only have the floral design, so I just use that as a placeholder. I'm also adding in some of the frozen items we have in the game. Because I've used the frozen partition as castle walls in the outskirts of this area, I wanted to also incorporate some of the frozen items into the enchanted forest and into the rest of the build, so that way it feels like it's cohesive and it all matches well together. At this point of the build, I was generally happy with the placement of all the bigger items, so we're now going in and adding in flowers and shrubs and all the little details. I've been hoarding my purple mums to use for this build, so I was happy I got to use them, and I also threw in some white flowers and pink flowers so that way it accented the purple. For some reason in my mind, purple is magical and enchanting, so I wanted to use it for this area. I really wanted the trail to look overgrown, so I'm also going to be dropping mushrooms and scattering those around the trail as well. And near the end, I'm also dropping some star fragments too, so that way it looks really magical at nighttime. Also, to be honest, after I played in the area for a little bit, I have tweaked some things around. So there is a shrub that is near the beginning of the trail. I've swapped that out for some flowers and just tweaked a couple things here and there, but pretty much it all has stayed the same. I also made sure to include some butterfly models, and the other item that I really wanted to use was the Rossetti model. I just think it's such a cute item and it's a really cute nod towards him, so I wanted to use that. He just looks like he's protecting the forest and it's just such a funny thing to see when you're walking through. I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but I did end up moving forward the incline a couple of spaces, and in turn the trail became a little bit longer as well. So it looks a whole lot better in my opinion, and I feel like it has a smoother trail to walk on now compared to what it is right now in the video. I plan to add another one of those Capricorn statues where the second incline is, but I didn't have enough materials to craft it at the time when I recorded this, so we'll have to wait until I get more star fragments to do that. We are now almost finished with the build. I'm adding in the last final details. I wanted to drop some items like the pine cones and stuff. It just makes it look really cute, and I also scattered some of the star fragments around. I used the Aries, Aquarius and some large star fragments just to add some variety. I would have used the normal basic yellow ones as well, but I've run out of them at the moment, so we're going to have to wait a little bit before I can add those too. This isn't related to the build at all, but once I'm almost finished with the island, I want to scatter some star fragments throughout, so that way it makes it look really magical and pretty at nighttime. But yeah, so we are literally almost done, I promise, and I'm really happy with how everything ended up turning out like, so I'm excited for you guys to see the final reveal. Even though it looks really pretty and really magical during the day, it shines the most in the evening, so I've decided to time travel so I can show you it in its full glory. So this is what it looks like. It looks so magical and so pretty, and I feel like the mush items really help bring in the enchanted feeling to this build, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, let me know by telling me what your favorite part of the build was. Otherwise, if you enjoyed today's video and you're not subscribed and would like to see more from me, I would really appreciate it if you did, so that way you don't miss out on any future uploads. I hope you all have an amazing day or night, and I love you all so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!